Friends, tonight, I'm going to tell you a story from a forgotten time, an era when faith and fear were two sides of the same coin. This is the story of a girl named Elara, who wandered into a desolate valley, toward an old, silent chapel, a place long abandoned by the living, but never by the whispers of the dead. Deep within the mist-covered valleys of an ancient kingdom lay the forgotten village of Winthrope, a place where time itself seemed to have stopped. Its crooked houses leaned toward one another like old men whispering secrets, and the cobblestone streets were always wet, as if the ground wept endlessly. At the edge of this silent settlement stood a ruined stone chapel, half buried in fog. The villagers called it the Whispering Chapel. None dared to go near it after sunset, for they said the walls murmured prayers no human tongue should repeat. Generations ago, this chapel had been sacred, but one night, it was sealed forever, after a priest's daughter mysteriously vanished inside, and no one ever saw her again. Since then, strange voices were heard through its cracked bell tower, soft as breath, yet cold as death. No one knew why the whispers had grown stronger lately. Some claimed they heard a woman's voice calling for help. Others said it was a curse reborn. But for Elara, a lonely girl who lived just outside the village, the whispers were different. They called her by name. Each night, she would stand by her window, staring at the faint outline of the chapel under the red moon. The wind carried those words to her, faint, trembling, and hauntingly familiar. "Elara, please help me." Something inside her stirred. Fear, yes, but also recognition. The voice felt like her own. And so, one night, holding a flickering lantern, she decided to go. As the church bell tolled once in the distance, Elara stepped into the fog. The whispers welcomed her. The night was colder than usual. The moon hung low, veiled behind drifting clouds, casting a pale, sickly glow over the forgotten valley. Elara wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders, gripping the handle of her flickering lantern. Its dim orange flame trembled with every breath of wind, like it feared the path ahead as much as she did. The road to the chapel was overgrown with blackened vines and twisted roots that reached from the ground like skeletal hands. With each cautious step, the earth beneath her boots gave a hollow sound, as if the soil itself remembered the dead buried below. In the distance, the chapel's bell tower rose against the fog, crooked, ancient, and cracked. A faint sound echoed through the mist, something between a sigh and a whisper. "Elara." She froze. The voice was soft, almost gentle, but it came from everywhere at once. The mist thickened, coiling around her legs, pulling her closer to the ruins. Her heart pounded in her chest. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to run. But something stronger held her, the need to know why the voice knew her name. The chapel's wooden doors loomed before her now, splintered and hanging on rusted hinges. Strange symbols were carved into the wood, half erased by time, but still faintly glowing under the moonlight. Ancient prayers, or perhaps warnings. Elara lifted the lantern higher. The glass caught the light, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw a shadow move inside, a shape that looked eerily like a woman, standing behind the altar. The whispers began again, this time clearer, almost pleading. "Help me, before he returns." And before she could take another breath, the doors creaked open on their own, slowly, painfully, welcoming her into the darkness within. Inside the chapel, the air was heavy, thick with dust, candle soot, and the faint scent of burnt incense that hadn't been lit in centuries. Elara's lantern cast trembling shadows along the stone walls. The pews were rotting, their wood blackened by age, and fragments of stained glass lay shattered across the floor like the remains of a forgotten prayer. On the altar, she noticed an old leather-bound book, its cover torn and stiff with mold. The pages were brittle, yet the ink inside seemed untouched by time. It was a journal, written by the chapel's last priest. As she read, her trembling voice echoed through the silence. "My daughter, blessed Elara, I could not let death take you. I sealed your soul within this holy house, until the sin could be washed away." Her blood turned cold. The priest, her own name, the cursed soul trapped inside this place. The whispers she heard were not haunting her, they were calling her home. A sudden gust of wind slammed the chapel door shut behind her. Candles that had long been dead flickered to life for just a moment, illuminating a mural above the altar. a painting of a man holding a child in his arms, both their faces scratched out. The whispers grew louder. The priest's story wasn't over. Elara's lantern flickered violently as the sound of whispers changed, no longer soft or distant, but close, surrounding her. They rose from the floorboards, from the cracks in the walls, from beneath the altar itself. She approached the stone platform slowly, feeling the ground vibrate beneath her boots. The air turned icy. Her breath formed mist as she knelt before the altar. "Help me." The voice was clear now. It came from underneath. Elara touched the cold stone, tracing her fingers along its edge until she found something carved into it. Ancient runes and, at the center, a symbol shaped like an eye. When she pressed it, a deep click echoed through the chapel. Dust fell from the ceiling as the altar shifted slightly, revealing a hidden passage below. The smell of damp earth and decay wafted upward. She hesitated, then lifted her lantern and began her descent into the darkness. As she climbed down the narrow stone steps, the whispers followed, soft, rhythmic, chanting her name over and over again. "Elara, Elara, Elara." The stairs ended at a cold iron door, etched with words she could barely read. "The one who bears the name shall break the chain." Her trembling hand reached for the handle. The iron door creaked open with a long, metallic wail. Inside was a crypt, vast and silent, its walls lined with unmarked tombs. The air was colder here, ancient, heavy with grief. Elara's lantern cast a small circle of light, just enough to reveal carvings along the walls, depictions of angels, demons, and a single figure kneeling before a burning cross. In the center of the chamber stood a stone sarcophagus, its lid covered in dust and spiderwebs. As Elara approached, her lantern flame flared bright for a heartbeat, illuminating what was carved into the stone. Her name, Elara. Her knees weakened. She stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. The realization struck like lightning. This tomb was hers. But before she could think, the ground beneath the sarcophagus shuddered. A whisper, louder than before, rose from inside the stone. "Free me, before he wakes." The air turned thick and suffocating. The lantern dimmed, nearly going out. Somewhere deep below, a low growl rumbled, ancient, inhuman. Elara looked up at the ceiling of the crypt, hearing faint footsteps above, echoing through the chapel she had just left. Someone, or something, was moving there. The crypt seemed endless, stretching into the shadows beyond her lantern's reach. As Elara moved deeper, she noticed something strange, a faint glimmer at the far end of the corridor. It wasn't light from her lantern. It was something else, cold, silvery, almost alive. Drawn to it, she approached slowly, her boots echoing softly against the damp stone floor. There, half buried in the wall, stood an ancient mirror, taller than any man, its frame carved with symbols that pulsed faintly like veins under skin. The glass was dark and cloudy at first, but as Elara raised her lantern, the fog on its surface began to clear. She saw her reflection, but not as she was. The woman staring back at her wore a tattered white gown, her hair matted with ash and blood, her eyes hollow and red like burning coals. Her mouth moved, whispering words that Elara could not hear. Terrified, she stepped closer. The reflection mimicked her every movement until it didn't. When Elara raised her lantern, the figure in the mirror stayed still, smiling faintly. Then it whispered, her own voice, twisted and cold. "You should not have come back." The glass trembled, spiderweb cracks spreading across its surface. A whispering wind rushed through the crypt, carrying distant screams. Elara stumbled backward, clutching her chest as the mirror's surface rippled like water, showing brief flashes of fire, chanting, and a man in priestly robes standing over her body. Her knees gave way. She realized this wasn't a mirror. It was a memory, one that belonged to her past life. The mirror's whispers grew louder until they formed words, prayers spoken in agony. Elara pressed her hands to her ears, but the voices filled her head, showing her flashes of another world. She saw a young girl, chained at the altar, her father, the priest, standing before her, tears streaming down his face as he raised a holy relic. He begged forgiveness as he sealed her soul within the chapel's stone walls. "I could not let death take you," he cried. "So I gave you to the light, forever." The ritual had gone wrong. The girl's soul never reached the light. It stayed behind, bound by her father's desperate love. Elara's eyes filled with tears as she realized the truth. She was that girl, reborn centuries later, drawn back by the echo of her own trapped spirit. The whispers weren't haunting her. They were her own cries for freedom, still echoing after lifetimes. The realization broke something inside her. The walls trembled, dust rained from the ceiling. And then, beneath the noise, she heard it. Slow, rhythmic footsteps above. Something was awakening. The temperature dropped sharply, her breath freezing midair. The lantern flickered and died. In the suffocating darkness, she heard the sound again. Footsteps descending the stairs. Each step was heavy, deliberate, echoing like a hammer against stone. A faint light appeared at the end of the corridor, not from fire, but from something unnatural. And then she saw him, the priest, or what was left of him. His robes were tattered, his face pale as bone, eyes hollow yet glowing faintly with a ghostly gold light. Chains hung from his wrists, clattering softly as he walked. "You should not have come here, my child," he said, his voice both human and otherworldly. "You were never meant to wake." Elara backed away, but the air around her grew heavy, pressing against her chest. The priest's shadow stretched across the walls, reaching for her like dark tendrils. "You broke the seal," he whispered. "Now, I must finish what I began." The ground cracked beneath her feet. The mirror behind her shattered, releasing a gust of icy wind that extinguished all light. Elara screamed as spectral hands rose from the tombs. Hundreds of souls, bound by the same curse, reaching toward her and the man who damned them all. And above the chaos, the chapel's ancient bell began to ring, slow and mournful, calling the dead to witness what was about to begin. The crypt quaked under the weight of the priest's fury. Dust and broken stones rained from the ceiling as Elara stumbled backward, clutching her lantern to her chest. "You should have stayed buried," the priest hissed, his voice echoing from every direction. But Elara's fear was changing, melting into something stronger. The visions, the whispers, the reflection, they had all been leading her to this moment. She raised her trembling hand toward the cross that hung crooked on the wall. Its metal glowed faintly under the lantern's dying light. Words began to form on her lips, words she had never learned, yet somehow remembered. "Domini, libera animam meam." "Lord, free my soul." The priest recoiled, his hollow eyes burning brighter. Shadows lashed out like serpents, wrapping around her arms and throat. She gasped for breath, but refused to stop chanting. The cross blazed with sudden fire. The whispers that once haunted her turned into a chorus, voices of the trapped souls rising in unison. The chapel itself began to scream. Elara fell to her knees, tears of blood streaking down her cheeks as the flames surged outward. Every soul the priest had bound was awakening, not to destroy her, but to fight beside her. It was no longer a haunting. It was a war for freedom. The air erupted with light. Elara's lantern burst, sending golden fire spiraling across the crypt. The flames clung not to stone, but to shadow, burning the darkness itself. The priest shrieked, his form unraveling like smoke caught in a storm. Yet even as he screamed, his voice trembled with sorrow. "I only wanted to save you, my child." The golden fire grew brighter, filling the underground chamber. The chains binding the spirits shattered, one by one, releasing ghostly figures into the air, each whispering their final prayer before fading into peace. Elara's body glowed faintly, her veins illuminated by light. Her voice rose above the roaring flames. "You damned me with love, Father, but I forgive you." A sudden stillness swept through the crypt. The fire consumed the last shadow and vanished, leaving only silence. And Elara, kneeling beneath the broken cross, her lantern now a soft, white flame hovering beside her. The curse was ending, but one final toll remained. From the smoke, the priest's hollow form stumbled forward, no longer a monster, but a man once more. His robes hung in ashes, his eyes, once glowing with fury, now dimmed with grief. He looked at Elara, his voice breaking. "Forgive me. I could not bear to lose you again." Elara reached out, her trembling hand touching his. For a moment, warmth returned, a father and daughter reunited across centuries of torment. Then his body began to fade, turning to dust as light seeped through his chest. His final words echoed softly. "Go be free, my little one." As his ashes scattered into the wind, the chapel above shook violently. The bell tower rang, one last time, its deep toll echoing across the valley like the heartbeat of a dying god. The shadows dissolved. The crypt filled with dawnlight for the first time in centuries. Above, the cracked bell swung slowly, its voice hollow and mournful. The rising sun poured through shattered windows, touching every stone with golden warmth. The Whispering Chapel, once cursed and lifeless, now stood in quiet peace. The vines that had strangled its walls began to wither, and the air grew still. Elara stepped out from the underground passage, her white dress scorched, her lantern still glowing faintly in her hand. She looked up at the bell tower, the same tower where centuries ago she had been sealed. For the first time, she heard no whispers, no cries, only silence and peace. But as she took a step forward, her body flickered like a reflection in water. She smiled faintly, understanding what it meant. Her soul had fulfilled its purpose. As the last toll of the bell faded into the distance, Elara's form dissolved into soft light, rising upward with the morning breeze. The curse was over. The chapel was free, and so was she. The first light of morning crept across the valley, pale and golden, spilling through the twisted trees and across the broken walls of the chapel. The fog that had haunted Winthrope for generations began to lift, revealing the village in its true form for the first time in centuries. Inside the chapel, the air felt new, no longer heavy with whispers or the weight of sorrow. The once dark altar now stood clean, the crucifix above it gleaming faintly in the sunlight. Dust drifted gently in the golden beams, like tiny spirits ascending toward freedom. The villagers, drawn by the sound of the final bell, gathered cautiously outside the ruined gates. For years, none had dared to come this close. But today, there was no fear, only curiosity and a strange calm in the air. Among them, an old woman whispered, "It's over, the curse is gone." Inside, the faint scent of roses lingered, something no one had smelled there for generations. And on the altar lay a small, burning lantern. Its light was soft, eternal, as if someone still watched over the place. As the villagers stepped into the chapel, they called her name, "Elara, are you here?" But there was no answer. Only her lantern burned at the center of the stone floor, surrounded by a faint circle of ash. The air shimmered with warmth where she had once stood, and in that light, they thought they saw a shadow, the shape of a young woman smiling. One of the children reached toward the flame, but an unseen breeze passed through, extinguishing it gently, like a farewell. From that day forward, no one ever saw Elara again. Yet at dusk, when the sun dipped behind the valley and the fog began to rise, a soft glow would appear in the chapel window. A single lantern, burning in silence. Years turned into decades. The chapel became a sacred place once more, its curse forgotten, its story fading into legend. Travelers passing through Winthrope often paused before the old ruins, drawn by the strange peace that surrounded them. Some swore that when the wind blew just right, they could still hear a voice, faint and beautiful, carried through the trees. Elara set us free. Others claimed they saw her silhouette standing by the chapel gate under the blood-red moon, holding her lantern, watching over those who dared to wander too close. And though the world moved on, the villagers never rebuilt the chapel. They left it as it was, quiet, sacred, and untouched, because they knew that somewhere in the drifting mist, Elara's spirit still guarded it, keeping the darkness away forever. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the bell icon, because the next story is even darker than this one. Candle.